what if instead of being weird, shy, geeky, or introverted, your brain is just wired differently? For adults with undiagnosed autism spectrum disorder, there's often an aha moment when you realize that ASD might be the reason why you've always felt so different. I Think I Might Be Autistic is here to answer the question, what's next? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah and I have autism and ADHD. I make weekly videos rating the representation of neurodiversity in the media so you can make an informed decision about what to read and watch to get accurate information about autism, ADHD, or other neurodivergent conditions. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button to join the neurodiverse bookworm family and not miss out on a single recommendation. Normally, when you suspect something is up with your health, you just go to your GP, and if they can't diagnose you, they'll refer you to a specialist who'll run some tests and then tell you definitively what's wrong with you. However, getting an autism diagnosis, especially as an adult, is a whole lot more complicated and confusing. Be prepared to fight to be heard before many specialists and learn to aggressively fight and self-advocate. I Think I Might Be Autistic lays out the diagnosis process for adults in plain language and in only 105 pages. The author of I Think I Might Be Autistic, Cynthia Kim, is herself a late diagnosed autistic woman. I believe she was diagnosed in her 40s after becoming a mother and of course getting married. And her goal in writing this isn't to tell you what to do, but to show you what worked and didn't work for me and provide you with the knowledge and resources you'll need to make your own way through the discovery and diagnosis process. A note on language. The language used to talk about autism spectrum disorders can be confusing at first. I use autism spectrum disorder, and Asperger's syndrome interchangeably. Asperger's syndrome is no longer an official diagnosis in the United States, having been folded into autism spectrum disorder as of May 2013. People who were diagnosed before Asperger's syndrome was retired are still regarded as having Asperger's, even though today they would be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I also use autistic and Aspie, shorthand for a person who has Asperger's syndrome, interchangeably to refer to myself. I sometimes use person with autism, on the autism spectrum, or with Asperger's when it makes the text easier to read. There is no single correct term. When referring to a specific person, it's always best to inquire if they have a preference and then use it. Sometimes the use of language in the autism community is heavily debated, and that's why I chose to include her note on language, because I agree with her. It seriously doesn't matter that much, and I personally don't have a preference. But of course, if I'm communicating with an individual and they have a preference, I'm quite happy to adapt myself to their preference in language usage, but I don't think it should be such a divisive issue that if someone uses the wrong term, they should get dogpiled on. Cynthia Kim starts out by explaining the criteria for an autism diagnosis from the DSM-5. Now, the language that the DSM uses is quite complicated, so she breaks it down into a series of questions about common autistic experiences from each of the DSM categories. For example, some of the questions she includes under the category difficulties with social initiation and response include: do you find it hard to approach others to initiate a conversation? Do you get easily bored when someone wants to talk about a subject that doesn't interest you? Do you find it hard to get excited when someone else shares news of an exciting or enjoyable experience they had? Does praise make you uncomfortable because you're unsure how to respond? And difficulties with nonverbal communication. Some of the questions are: Have you ever been told that your facial expressions are inappropriate for the situation or do not match your feelings? Do you find making eye contact uncomfortable, difficult, or even painful? How about difficulties with relationships? Do you find it difficult to judge how another person is feeling about you? Do you laugh or smile at the wrong time? Have you been told that you're aloof, withdrawn, or in your own world? Do you have a lower than average need for social interaction? Under the category atypical speech and movements, do you repeat sounds such as animal sounds, grunts, growls, or hums? Do you have a large vocabulary or a strong preference for very exact use of words, regardless of how commonly used those words might be? Do you use unusually formal words or speech structure? And there's so many other categories and questions that I don't have time to go over them all in this video, but it's an excellent way to see if you're answering yes to a large majority of these questions. There might be a good chance that you are on the spectrum, because although a lot of these traits actually individually are common in the general population, to have a high percentage of these traits to the point where they cause difficulties for you means that you're likely on the spectrum and could possibly benefit from getting a diagnosis. Cynthia Kim also addresses the rush of mixed feelings after that aha moment of realization that I mentioned in the beginning. Initially, you might be excited and happy, relieved even, to understand why you've always felt so different, but then reality sets in. She mentions her own experience and how she dealt with it. Not the happy, yay, I'm different, I'm unique, I'm special, autistic. More like, holy crap, I'm defective, disabled, challenged, never gonna get any better, autistic. This was when the morning began. Once the bright, shiny new "this explains everything" stage wore off, I started thinking about the other side of being autistic. I wasn't going to outgrow my social awkwardness. I wasn't going to wake up one day and suddenly have a balanced emotional life. The challenges I faced weren't imagined, and they weren't going to magically disappear. They were with me for life. This is me. This is always going to be me. Forever. Talk about hard realizations. She also talks about the pros and cons of getting an official diagnosis. She considers self-diagnosis after a lot of research as valid, especially since obtaining a diagnosis as an adult is so difficult, and also self-discovery is an important step towards getting a diagnosis. That was what happened to me. I began to realize these traits and research it obsessively, and once I was fairly sure that this is what was up, I started the process of getting an assessment, which was basically I went to my doctor, said I wanted this assessment. The doctor then referred me to a psychologist, and I talked with her, and of course she wasn't able to diagnose me, but she referred me to a neuropsychologist in the area, and I made an appointment, got a referral to him, and waited a few months. And in that, I'm really lucky. Most stories I've heard, especially for women, there's a ton of misdiagnoses and long waiting periods. And I feel so lucky, so privileged that I didn't really have to fight or wait very long. And one of the reasons both the author and I wanted an official diagnosis was for peace of mind and or validation of a self-diagnosis. And sometimes even with a diagnosis, there are days that I ask, who did you lie to get a diagnosis? I still have that imposter syndrome, but I would feel, kind of weird telling people that I'm autistic or ADHD if I didn't have a diagnosis. And it also confirms it so that if I need services or supports and accommodation at school. And having an ADHD diagnosis also allows me to get medications that I need for that as well. Chapter 11 is all about the different types of professionals who are qualified to make a diagnostic assessment of autism in adults. Neuropsychologists, psychiatrists, some psychologists, or during the course of therapy, or other specialists and trained clinical assessors. And each of these professionals has a slightly different way of diagnosing, more formal versus informal. And she explains all the differences between them and says that the goal of the assessment should not only be to make or rule out a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but to quantify your strengths and identify areas where you would benefit from supports and adaptations. Cynthia Kim continues in the following chapters talking about how to prepare for your assessment, what an assessment will be like. It contains spoilers of the test, so maybe some assessors might not like that. It might mess a little bit with the validity of the test, but it's nice to know and be prepared for what you could encounter during an assessment process. My assessment was an initial interview of an hour and then 2 afternoons of 4 hours of neuropsychological testing that left me absolutely drained and exhausted afterwards. Some of the tests seemed like they should be so easy a small child could do them, but they were deceptively difficult. Cynthia Kim doesn't stop after getting you through the assessment process and getting your assessment report. She continues on to talking about how to accept your diagnosis and knowing what you should change versus what you should accept as you deal with your newfound reality. She goes on to say, my litmus test for change versus acceptance is simple. Is the cost of changing this thing higher than the benefit I'll gain from the change? Some changes require little more than mindfulness or occasional reminders. Other changes require me to move out of my comfort zone and face some hard truths. The outcome, or at least the goal, is that I struggle less with some aspect of my life. Those are the good changes, the ones I'm eager to make. Other changes feel pointless to me. These are often the changes that would make other people more comfortable by making me seem less odd. With all of the things I could be working on, I don't see the point of investing my limited energy in those types of changes. And now that you've got your diagnosis, what are you going to do about it? Who needs to know? Are you going to keep it mostly to yourself? Who should you disclose to? How should you disclose? Cynthia Kim goes into the who, what, where, when, why, how of the disclosure process. Also, when you get a diagnosis, your sense of identity will almost certainly be shattered because now you have to answer the question, who am I, after an entire lifetime of trying to be someone else that you weren't meant to be. She talks about this, and I related so much to what she says. I feel like I'm still learning to be autistic. If you've spent a great deal of your life not knowing that you're autistic, it may take time to learn what being an autistic means on both personal and cultural levels. It's a great idea to get involved in online autism communities or even local support groups, because finding people who are like you can help you to feel a lot less alone, and even find allies that can help you in your process of self-discovery. Maybe try writing down your thoughts and experiences, whether or not you share them publicly. I found that can help organize my thoughts and pull them out of my head so that they don't just keep swirling around like a disorganized hurricane. I really enjoy participating in these online communities, sharing tips and tricks with those who are not necessarily as far along in their self-discovery process as I am, and also learning from those who share similar struggles. It helps me feel less alone. And I really wish that there were some kind of in-person support group where I live that I could be an active member of. I think I Might Be Autistic is a 5 across the board in all categories, from authenticity, relatability, accuracy, diversity, encouraging you to embrace yourself, who you are, embrace the diversity across the spectrum, and it's quite accessible, with each chapter including a list of summarized points. And I want to end with her closing thoughts. Wherever you are in your journey, you're not alone. There are other adults out there with the same questions, the same confusion, the same doubts and fears, the same excitement and aha moments. The realization that you might be autistic, or the discovery that you are, can be life-altering. As someone who has gone through the ups and downs of getting an ASD diagnosis as an adult, I can tell you that it changes everything, and at the same time, I'm much the same person I was before. I've always been autistic, and I always will be. The difference is now I'm struggling less with myself. The knowledge that I've gained through the discovery and diagnosis process has helped me accept myself as I am and identify the types of changes I'd like to make in my life. Some changes have been easy, and others feel impossible to pull off, but the process continues to teach me about myself in new and unexpected ways. Wherever your own journey leads you, I wish you courage and perseverance and happiness. I Think I Might Be Autistic is the perfect compilation of resources to help you in your self-discovery and diagnosis journey. At only 105 pages long, it is jam-packed with fantastic information, well organized, well done, and I highly recommend it. So, where are you on your diagnosis journey? I would love to read your stories down in the comments, and maybe I can give you some helpful advice, or perhaps other people reading the comments who've walked this path can help you. That's the benefit of community, supporting each other wherever we are. For a more in-depth discussion of autism in women, click here to watch my review of Cynthia Kim's other book, Nerdy, Shy, and Socially Inappropriate. And don't forget to like, comment what you would like to see me review next, and subscribe so you don't miss the latest review.